we're starting to see a lot more people jumping in, starting opportunity zones, and our hope is that the result will be a lot of capital getting aggregated into funds that have to find a home in communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to capital.
Sean, you've heard the critics. How do you respond to those that say it's just a big tax giveaway to wealthy investors?
Well, from my perspective, this was a purely philanthropic mission. And when I set up my foundation, I spent a lot of time thinking about how can I help communities that don't have access to some of the advantages that I had. When you go to Silicon Valley, you find that there's a ton of investors. In fact, there's more investors than there are great companies to invest in. And this is a problem that it turns out is pretty unique to Silicon Valley. This is not a problem that most of America has. In fact, most of the country doesn't have access to capital. It's difficult to find investors to start a business. It's hard to attract credible investors, to get a critical mass of investment activity like you find in Silicon Valley. So this all began from a desire to try to spread that access to capital more evenly across the country in places that really just didn't enjoy, they didn't benefit from the technology boom or the economic recovery.
You know, one of those more controversial sites in a city was the zone in New York City, where Amazon decided to invest and build one of its new headquarters. Then, of course, local opposition from lawmakers. It walked away. Was that a mistake? How do you view that whole thing?
You know, that's like bad optics on the part of Amazon. It's, you know, I'm not even sure they were thinking about opportunity zones, but they certainly wouldn't have benefited from it. In fact, a big company going to an opportunity zone and creating jobs is actually a great thing for all the other small businesses that would benefit. Opportunity zones specifically cannot benefit an existing large company. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about how exactly the benefit can be applied, but it's really applicable to new business formation, you know, all of your assets need to be in the opportunity zone. That's obviously not the case with Amazon, so they would never have benefited from it. But, you know, it wouldn't be a bad thing if there were spillover opportunities for entrepreneurs to start local businesses or to start other businesses supporting big companies.
I wanted to pivot and talk a little bit about Facebook, Sean. What do you make of Mark Zuckerberg's recent pivot towards welcoming regulation of his platform?
You know, I think any industry should be, you know, open to, you know, smart regulation, and this is not a new problem. When companies get big and new industries form, they typically start in an unregulated environment, and then at a certain point, you know, there's a balance that needs to be struck between, you know, government and industry. And I think it's just about trying to find that correct balance where you don't want to stifle innovation, but you need to make sure that there's proper oversight.
Do you think that it can get at some of the problems that I've heard you talk about, Facebook discussed? I mean, I found the quote in 2017 when you said, "God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains." Is this a problem that can be addressed by regulation?
So that sort of problem, I think not. I mean, those are the problems that I've pointed to in the past are cultural issues. They're questions of how do we relate to technology, and those types of cultural issues are best resolved through a dialogue. This is a conversation that families all over the world are having about the relationship between themselves and technology, and between, you know, the way their kids are going to use technology, the role that technology will play in shaping our identities and personalities as we get older, you know, as we grow up with these new platforms. And this is not a new problem. Every generation for the last several hundred years since the Industrial Revolution has faced these types of questions about the relationship between society and technology.
Sean, what do you make of some of the most recent high-profile IPOs, like Lyft, like Uber? And do you think that they're going public too late?
So for sure, this is an issue with companies where the typical time frame to go public that venture capitalists like to, 20 years ago it was a 4 to 6 year time horizon to go public, and now obviously companies are waiting 10 years or longer in some cases, and that does feel a little long. I think that public company investors would like to share in more of the growth. There's obviously reasons why companies would prefer to stay private. It makes it easier to maneuver in a very rapidly changing environment without having to telegraph everything you're doing to the public market.
Have you gotten in on any of these? Would you be an investor in a ride-sharing company, or, for that matter, maybe even better, an alternative meat company?
Well, Founders Fund, which was the fund that I was a partner at for many years, was an investor in Lyft. Travis Kalanick was a good friend of mine when he started Uber, so I was sort of torn between the two. But no, I've not been actively trading in the space.
Sean, I just wanted to ask about the level of innovation you see in the US today in the tech space versus in China. Given all the debate around Huawei, putting aside any trade tensions and how China may have got its level of expertise in IP, do you think that they're roughly evenly matched compared to the US in terms of innovation today?
There is an interesting question about are they pulling ahead in various ways. Where I tend to focus with regard to China and innovation is in life sciences and biotech, because even though it feels like the Wild West here in the U.S. with immuno-oncology, synthetic biology, and CRISPR, in China it really is the Wild West. They don't have the level of clarity in terms of the regulatory framework that we have built up with our FDA. So it remains to be seen how biotech will evolve between the U.S. and China over the next decade. But this is something I think we should all be paying more attention to. And if we believe that the largest cost center in our economy is and will be healthcare, then so many opportunities for innovation will revolve around healthcare, life sciences, pharmaceutical, biotech. And so China, this is an area where the U.S. needs to be competitive, where we need to be thinking about the future, and we need to make sure that we're staying ahead of it.
Finally, Sean, it just ties it all together between the trade war and the opportunity zones where we started. It sounds like you've been supportive of some of this administration's approach. That was certainly in the tax legislation. Overall, do you think President Trump is succeeding in his mission to become a pro-business president?
Yeah, it's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. The Opportunity Zone legislation was actually introduced originally as the Investing in Opportunity Act under Obama, and we're very pleased with the way this administration, the Trump administration, has handled implementation. First passing it in the tax reform bill and then handling implementation. So with regard to the Opportunity Zone piece of the tax bill, we're obviously quite happy. But I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the bigger picture there.